All right, we should be, I think we're live, but yeah.
Yeah, at least I see the live tag on Zoom.
Yep, yeah, there we are. Yeah, I see it. There's always like a few seconds where it says that it's loading up, but it's
Yeah.
already live. And so I always have struggles with that. And then it like starts playing the live stream in my headphones like while I start. And that just makes everything more confusing because then I'm like trying to talk while I'm already talking. Um,
It's nice to keep a little consistency. So all the people who would have watched the earlier videos, they would be familiar with our
yes.
initial thing of are we live? Are we not
Are we
live?
live? I don't know. That yeah, people don't know that that is our intro. It's actually planned out. That is our intro.
Confused coders.
Yes. Confused coders. I think when we branch this out into a larger podcast, I think that's the name of our podcast is the Confused
Yes.
Coders. Welcome to Data Science Club number something. Today we're going to talk about using R Shiny to make a dashboard, like a data science visualization dashboard for COVID data, similar, but in a lot of ways a lot more complicated than what we looked at last week, because this is something somebody else has spent a lot of time on. So we're going to go over it really kind of high level, but then next week, hopefully we'll kind of build our own app based on the data, so we can see what that looks like. But let's check this out. All right. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, sweet. You can see my screen.
Yeah, and our Shiny is pretty similar to Streamlit. It is much older than Streamlit, hence more mature as a model. Streamlit, I think, is fairly new. It does give you a lot of options, and we haven't covered all the options in Streamlit by any stretch of imagination. But yeah, since our Shiny server has been there for a much longer time, it is, I believe, a much more mature model and allows you to do a bit more things than Streamlit for now. And it's kind of like Streamlit, I would say. And then, but yeah, we are going to take a look at one of the, even in our Shiny, we are going to take a look at one of the mature apps that you can develop using that technology. And this is like the goal, the level that at which we want people to reach. But like William mentioned, we are going to begin small from next week, and we are going to build a simple app with our Shiny first.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Robbie and I both are novices to these web dashboards from data science, data stuff, and so we're learning right along with you guys, and so this is exciting. It's fun stuff to play around with. So I put in the comments the links to the two web pages that we're looking at. The first is the link to this R Shiny app, and this is in the R Shiny gallery, and so this is an app that they thought was really cool, so they wanted it to be public. So if you can interact with the app here, it's kind of embedded, but if you click on View App, it takes you to just the dashboard, which I think responds maybe a little bit faster. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's really pretty cool. So you can see it has data all the way through June 30th. So that would be, is that today or yesterday?
I
That's
think
yesterday.
it's yesterday, yeah.
And so it's pulling the up-to-date data, and so you can see the cases kind of throughout the world, which is really kind of neat. You can come over here and specify that you want to look at just a plot of some sub-region. Let's see, I think it's got a little bit of, yeah, it's just got a little bit of time to load up. There's a ton of data that this is pulling in. All right, so let me deselect all.
Yeah, so that none of them show up.
Okay, there we go. And then we can just click on the USA. Okay. All right. And we'll just look at cases per 100,000. And oh, that's the minimum date. Okay. All right. So you can look at the cumulative, the new cases. Which I think this is the graph that everybody's showing in the news right now,
Yeah.
or on Facebook. Cumulative log 10. And so yeah, the other interesting thing is it's got similar data for prior epidemics, pandemics, whatnot. So like you can look at the swine flu and Ebola, and then you can look at COVID. And so even just comparing it to like those, at least with the data that's in these plots, you can see COVID got a lot more places than any of these other things. All right, and so then outbreak comparisons. Right now, looks like swine flu has more than a lot of other cases, but COVID's climbing up there.
Yeah, and H1N1 has had some time, and it's still not. I believe it's still not eradicated with any vaccine or something. So people still have cases of H1N1, but on the other hand, COVID is fairly new. It started from January, so only 5-6 months, and
Yeah.
it's pretty close to catching up with H1N1. That shows that it's a much more transmissible disease, and it's easier to catch COVID.
Yeah, and that's just for the number of cases. Looking at the total number of deaths, it looks like in 2009, this is saying that this is the World Health Organization number, which is like 18,000, but that the actual number from modeling studies is somewhere between 100 and 200,000. But even so, COVID kind of outstrips all of those. And then, so this is another kind of interesting thing, is that the fatality rate for COVID isn't as bad as SARS or Ebola, but then I've heard some things saying like, that's also part of the reason why it's so widespread.
Yeah. Generally, so I'm not an expert on virus or virology, but based on whatever I have studied, it's basically like the faster it kills and the more it kills, the virus kills itself out in these cases, because you are more likely to develop symptoms, so you are more likely to be quarantined or something with those diseases, and that's one of the reasons why they are not as widespread as COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So so that's kind of an interesting look at things. Yeah, so that's kind of the overview of this app itself. But then if we go back to that Our Shiny page, then we can actually look at the code. And so one of the nice things about this is if you wanted to create your own version of this app, or just instantiate this and then, excuse me, let's play around with the colors or things and see how this is created. You've got all of the code here to do that. The other nice thing about this is that on top of that, there's some subcodes for creating the data that gets input. So how is the data continually pulled in so that it has the up-to-date data? Mm-hmm. And so like if we look at this New York data script, then we can see how the data is actually pulled in. So if you wanted to create a dashboard like this, or if you just wanted to use this data for your own purposes, how would you find the data? So the nice thing is we see here that they're actually pulling in the data from the New York Times GitHub the same way that Ravi did with his Streamlit app that we looked at last week. And so we could actually just take this script if we want, and it would create, looks like it just creates a CSV file for us that then we could import easily for future use. Most likely in the case of the app, it only has to like pull this in. It has to do this operation maybe once a day or something like that. And so if it does it every single time it loads up, it probably slow things down.
Mm-hmm. And there are different methods to keep the data updated. Mm-hmm. And it's basically the first time you are going to pull it and you launch your R Shiny server app, your app is going to be just have the initial data set from which it actually began. But there are several other methods, like you can have a cron tab or something on the server on whichever R Shiny server is running, and you can pull data from there. There are other methods of pulling the latest data set as well, but it totally depends. There are different mechanisms to do the same thing, but yeah, that is one thing that you might want to keep. Like even with the Streamlit app, till the time, once you have pulled the initial clone of the repo, your app is still going to keep showing the same thing because it doesn't have access to the new data. So one method is you go before starting the app, you go into that COVID-19 data and pull the latest data set and then launch your Streamlit app, and then you'll have the latest data. Or if you have everything on a server, then you have some other mechanism which goes every evening or every, I think the New York Times updates their data set every morning, 8 or 9 or something. So you can have a cron tab that every morning at 9 or 10, it goes in and pulls the latest data sets. That way your app keeps up-to-date data set and it's showing all the up-to-date data set.
Yeah. That makes sense. And so if we just take a real quick look at this, so it looks like they're using this dplyr library for part of their data cleaning later, but then they're just reading in. So this is nice that R can do this. I knew that pandas could do it. I hadn't ever tried to do this from R directly to read a file from a URL, but it makes sense that it can do that. And so it goes ahead and creates that, and then does some data cleaning, and we won't go into too much detail on this.
Yeah, and we had an earlier video where we talked about tidyverse and dplyr. And we do talk about some of these cleaning methods over there. So if you're interested in finding out how to clean up data, if you're not familiar with tidyverse and dplyr, you can go to that video and check out how you you can go and check it out, and this would start making more sense to you than about what the actual author of the code is trying to do.
Yeah. All right. So then the other thing that is contained here. So I think this JHU data is where some of that other information is pulled for the other diseases that are in there. And then this app.r is what actually puts together that whole app. So we are not going to walk through this whole thing because it's over 1,000 lines of code. But we wanted to show it to you in terms of just saying, like, this is something that you can do, or something that we could do, to actually create an app like this one, just from a computer language that you feel comfortable with, like Python or like R. And I know MATLAB's got some app functionality built into it, but I'm not sure if it's got this kind of web dashboard functionality. We'll have to look into that as well. But overall, it works the same way that anything else works. First, they run the scripts to update the New York Times data locally. And then after that happens, they make sure they've got all of their packages. And after they've got all their packages, then they load all their data. And then after the data is loaded, they make a whole bunch of functions for different plotting. And so all of these things, creating these plots, loading data, is stuff that we would do just on an ordinary script to do this data processing. So that's not anything new. I'm trying to see where the new stuff ends up showing up. Most of this is still just how do we make these plots. This is more data processing stuff. All right, so again, like this base map, this is how are you creating the visualization itself. And then here we go. So it's this shiny UI part is, where do we put the text boxes? Where do we want stuff to be? And then it takes all of those previous functions in as inputs at different points. And so you can see this is a lot of, just documentation even that's going to show up as comments. And then it looks like this is some defaults for how the Shiny server works. And yeah, so we're going to have to, like Ravi said at the beginning, and we talked about, this is a really big, hairy, scary R Shiny app. But the message is that the code is here. We're going to try to basically use their pulling of the New York Times data to create a much simpler app for us to go through as a tutorial next week, or in the future at some point. And yeah, we'll take a look at it. But the data is here, the code is here. Just know that this is possible. It is within your reach, and it's just a matter of digging into this code and trying to get it to run. But we'll do a simpler R Shiny app in the future. But this is a very full featured app, and so we wanted to show this as kind of an aspirational demonstration of, this is what our data science dashboards can look like eventually. If I had to make one like this today, I would start just digging into this code, because I haven't done that a lot personally. But this seems like a really great place to start for building those sorts of things.
Yeah, and generally when you start building these kind of dashboards, it's basically like you start with a block And once you are through with 5, 6 blocks, like even just plotting different graphs, once you are through with 5, 6 plots, generally the things or the other plots that you have to make after that, that's pretty simple. You generally copy things and move some of the variables here and there, and you can have your sixth plot, and then the seventh plot, and then the eighth plot. And similarly with the R Shiny thing, once you have built one tab, it's a little easier. I would not say completely simple, just because like William, I don't have much experience with R Shiny, apart from the fact just knowing what R Shiny server does and is used for, and seeing the app that William just showed us in the beginning. So it's once you have one tab running, it might become a bit more easier to build a second app, third tab, and fourth tab. But yeah, it is a big, it is a complicated R Shiny app that has been built over here. So it is aspirational kind of an app, especially for beginners.
Yep. So, all right. Well, cool. Well, then hopefully next time we'll be able to put together something that kind of resembles this, but on a much simpler level, maybe a lot fewer lines of code that we can implement more easily, and it'll be easier to see how we can pull in our own data to make a similar app. But it is really cool to see how the technologies that we're playing around with can be used to make things that are really complicated later on down the road.
Yeah, and we have been concentrating on COVID dataset because that is highly relevant, and I'm pretty sure every one of you have seen these dashboards in one or the other web page, and we just wanted to show that it's within your grasp to make these dashboards.
Yeah. And the other nice thing about making this with the COVID data is it's all publicly available. So it makes it really easy to find that data. So
True.
all right. Well, we will talk to you guys next week.